Then the fourth thing I noticed is a pattern out there that I want you to avoid and so forth. Let's throw it up on the screen for everybody. Is I started noticing that, a lot of you still are trying to be perfect. And when you're trying to be perfect, I always tell people perfection is the lowest standard of all. How could I say that? Because there is no perfect, and there's no perfect. So what happens is you say, well, oh gosh, I got to be perfect, I got to be great, I got to do this, I got to do that. And then you don't do it, and you beat yourself up to prove to yourself that you really care. It's a crazy, silly, dumb pattern that all of us have done at times. Who's ever been too perfectionist-oriented and didn't do squat? Perfection gets, a focus on perfection gets in the way of greatness, because greatness doesn't come overnight. Greatness comes from practice. Greatness comes from doing something over and over and over again. I always tell people, people get rewarded in public for what they practice intensely in private. If you look at, I'm privileged enough to have a small piece of the Golden State Warriors ownership in them. And I also, I've worked with a team several times and had some championship rings from working with them. One of the greatest players in history besides LeBron James is Steph Curry. Steph Curry is the greatest three-point shooter in the history of NBA. Nobody's even close. Now you go look at him, and he makes it look so easy. Who knows what I'm talking about? Steph Curry, I don't know because it's around the world. He makes these shots from like three-quarters court, half court even. He shoots the ball very often. He's chumping his thing, and he turns. He turns before the ball goes through. He's that confident. And people go, that's unbelievable. But then I got to work with him, and guess what he does? He practices 500 shots a day, every day, 7 days a week minimum. So think about that. That's 3,500 shots a week. That's 14,000 shots a month. That's 168,000 shots a year. And he's had 15 professional seasons. So he has practiced 2,520,000 shots during that career. Now, that's interesting. Let's throw up on screen. I'll show you these numbers so you don't just run through your head here. Can you guys throw this up for them? So you'll see here he makes 500 shots a day. It's 168,000 shots a year, 2.52000 shots in practice for 15 years. So 168,000 shots in practice, and he's only taken 1,062 shots in a season. So the guy is taking 168 times more practice shots than actual shots. And based on that, he's been able to be in a position where he's made 3,376 three-pointers, making him the best in history. In other words, he is only making 0.1% of the shots because of his practice. The guy is doing so much more in practice, so when he goes to release that ball, he knows. And people look at Steph and go, he's a genius. Yes, his genius is his practice. And he's not trying to be perfect. He's doing the best he can over and over again and refining his skills. So you want to have a principle that perfection's out the door. I'm not here to be perfect. I'm here to constantly move towards greatness. And the way you get towards greatness is you make mistakes, you learn. You make mistakes, you learn. You don't beat yourself up, and you keep moving forward. Okay? 5, I should say. A bunch of you saying, I feel so good, I don't want this to go away. And the only way it doesn't go away is you've got to condition it in you. Like, we only had 3 hours a day together for 3 days, and I'm adding this little 90 minutes or 2 hours just to make sure you get the cap on it. And again, I hope you come to the seminar. I know all of you won't, but many of you will. Not all of you can. But I want to make sure you understand that if you go lift weights for one day, you're going to feel good for that day. But if you go, to a workout camp for 4 or 5 days, day and night and day, it's like learning the language and sending you to Italy. You're going to develop patterns that you don't have to think about, where it'll just be automatic. In fact, with exercise, just physical exercise, studies show that if you'll work out for 6 months straight and not miss, whatever it is, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, 3 days a week, even if you stop working out, unless you get really injured, you will eventually come back to working out again because it gets in your nervous system. Make sure if that makes some sense to you, understand how that gets in your body, right? So if you don't want it to go away, then you got to practice it. You got to go do some immersion with me or somewhere else and get that immersion so these patterns are in you. If you have to think about it, it's too late. So I've tried to do that. Even these 3 hours get you where you actually experience some of these things. Like, I think, for example, how many of you feel no problem being able to quickly maybe go in your warrior now or your magician and get some feedback? How many feel like that's something you can do easily? So that one's not very hard to get in a pattern because there's nothing in the way once you just give yourself permission to do it. Other things, you got to condition them so automatic. Like you don't get a bicep because you worked out one time. So if you don't want it to go away, don't go away, right? That's the real simple thing. Get yourself back in the mental, emotional gym. For me today, I still twice a year go do something to maximize my brain, my ability, my body, some skill set I want to get every single year. I remember one year was one of the roughest ones. I always put it in my schedule in advance because if you don't, your schedule gets full. So I decide in the beginning of the year, I'm going to do these two things. They're usually multi-day type experiences. And a couple of years ago, I found out about this thing that helps you train your brain to go into alpha waves. Alpha waves are where you're really creative, and alpha waves you're really happy. And you have to go through this process. And I just finished doing my Date with Destiny seminar, which is one of my favorites, but it's the most intense. It's 6 days long, and it was in Australia. And because of some time zone things and some schedules, the only way I could do this program was fly straight from finishing that program, 6 days and nights, me pushing like crazy, fly 20 hours to Arizona to go to this location where for 5 days, they start the morning, it takes an hour to put all these electrodes on your brain. And then they put you in this freezing-ass room that's pitch black, and you just think, and as you're thinking, it makes tones, and you learn how to make the tones and make alpha. And it is very hard to do initially, especially if you're a focused person. If you're unfocused, it's actually easy. But I'm a fairly focused person. And I remember being in there for about 6 hours in this cold thing with these things on my head thinking, who the hell enrolled me in this stupid thing? How do I get out of it? Oh, I enrolled me, right? But I'm so glad I stuck with it. I committed. At the end of 5 days, it was a total transformation for me. But if I didn't put that in my calendar and lock it in and commit the time, the energy, and money in my continued growth, I wouldn't be there. And by the way, I did this in the beginning when I had no money, right? I went to Jim Rohn, like I told you. I borrowed the money. It was more expensive than my home, which was the car I was sleeping in for $1,200. It'd be like $10,000 now. So, I read the other day, I don't know if you saw this, but if you follow Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors of all time, someone was asking him the other day, like, what do we do about inflation? What do we do? I mean, inflation's grown. It could be 7%, 8%. What? And Buffett was really clear. He said, you need to make sure that you just become 8, 9, 10, maybe 15 or 20% more productive. It won't matter. And people are saying, what if the currency drops? He goes, if we got shekels and you've invested in yourself and added to your skills, he said, think about this. Every time you invest in yourself, because when I interviewed him the first time for Money Master the Game, I asked him, what's been the most important investment you ever made? I thought he was going to say Coca-Cola or Geico. I know all his investments, right? And he goes, well, the most important investment I ever made is what you do. And I said, well, I do a lot of things. What is it? And he goes, Tony, I went to Dale Carnegie when I was really young. And he goes, if I hadn't done that, all my other skills would be worthless because I'd learned how to communicate my ideas. Otherwise, they would have died on my lips. He said, it changed me. It transformed me. And he said, when people invest in themselves, he just said this the other day, in a skill set or an ability, it's the most valuable thing because, number one, no one can tax it, and you have it for the rest of your life. It keeps getting better and better. Your skills get better and better. So making that investment in yourself and getting more productive is the most important investment you can ever make in your life. So I still do that no matter where I am in my life because if you stop growing, you're not going to feel fully alive. So if you don't want it to go away, don't go away. Commit yourself. Put yourself in some immersion experiences regularly, and your growth will be explosive.